Talk to Tom Cruise about that. My most recent book was, Click, which was about how to encourage people to act on the website.
And you click on it and it says that, hey, Paul, you are here for the first time or you're here for the nth time. And we really enjoy that, you are our customer. For this special occasion, just for this once, we're giving you 10% discount.
That is the core of good user experience design. User experience design is not the same as the conversion rate optimization work I do, because in conversion rate optimization, the aim is, as you said, to get the user to do something. With the user experience design, it's to let the user do the thing they want to do. Very reluctantly contacted Apple. They picked up in 3 rings, and you can sit and watch videos of people moving around the interface. They're going, why isn't this stupid thing working?
Thank you for coming on the podcast, and it's been amazing to have you here. It's a pleasure. I'm following you from last so many years, and when I got the opportunity to talk to you over here and get your insights over things, it's really amazing. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Well, thank you for inviting me. It's always nice to hear that people have been following me for a while, although it does make me feel very old. Because people go, oh, I've been following you for 15 years. And I'm going, oh, dear, have I really been doing this that long?
Yeah, but at the same time, we're also growing older, that we have been following from so long. You're in this space from quite long. And I've personally learned a lot from you. Looking at I've read Click as well. I've learned a lot from you, from your articles and, Boag World and all the places. And yeah, we're going to put all those links here. I'm also on your Slack channel, Boag World. I am. I look at it sometimes, but I'm not able to reply at times. Just for example, today I looked at a very humorous post about a shoe, which was having 5 fingers. And it was like, I wanted to react on it, but then, I wear so many hats at times that, some people came inside my office and they wanted to talk over something. But yeah, I look at it, I'm a regular visitor. I'm a non-existent, not talking visitor, but I am a visitor that I'll start talking soon.
You've really sold my Slack channel really well by basically saying we talk about shoes a lot of the time.
No, we'll put the link here, and so anyone who is watching it can go to that Slack channel, and it's a fun community for design and design journalists, and it's an amazing community.
Yeah, it's just social media all became a little bit toxic for a while back there. So we decided that we'd just create a nice little safe space where we hang out and chat together. And it's, very nice. And there's developers in there, designers, marketers, all kinds of random people. But we built a nice little community. It's very pleasant.
This podcast is all about what we could learn from you, from your really, really vast experience, and what exactly we could learn from you. So we thought that, we'll have something like, user behaviors, your top 5 or 10, list of user behaviors. What do you think about those, so that we can dive deeper into it?
Mm-hmm. Okay. Happy to talk about whatever you'd like. You fire away.
So I just wanted to know, about you're working from so long. So what kind of things, user behaviors you have seen, that paradigm shifts, and how things have changed, and maybe some of your projects, where you have worked and you thought that, okay, we were working on something and it changed into something else. Yeah. Are there any scenarios like that?
Yeah, I mean, there's been so many changes over the years in user behavior that it's almost hard to know where to begin, really. I mean, from rise of mobile and, the demise of Flash, that you go back even further, and users didn't used to scroll on websites, and that confused them. So there's been lots of changes over the years. I think more recently, some of the bigger changes that I've seen have been around expectations. I think it was some senior executive at IBM once said something that I think is very true, which is the last best experience somebody has anywhere online becomes their minimum expectation for all future experiences. And I think that that's very true and very unfair in many ways, because, you know, people look at the free tools they get from people like Google and Dropbox and Zoom and, you know, all of these different platforms out there, and that becomes their minimum expectation of every experience that they have online. And of course, we don't all have the budgets and the manpower of Google and Facebook and people like that, but those are the kinds of expectations we're seeing in users, and their expectations are they're very demanding in terms of the length of time they're willing to commit to you before they make a judgment call on whether you're worth their attention. They are very unforgiving about obstacles and barriers in their ways. I don't know why I'm saying they, like there's some other people. We're all users ultimately. And if you just think about your own behavior, you know, how often you just go, oh, this is annoying, and you give up on it and walk away from it. So I think that's the biggest thing, is how much people's expectations have gone up, how quickly people will dismiss one option and go and look at another. That's really struck me over recent years. In terms of how that affects the, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, so you know, we also had like paradigm shifts, like hamburger menus. Many people did not know what those three lines were.
Yeah.
Or maybe it was two at the start and then it became three, and we were like going around and discussing that how can we do that. But infinite scrolls, you know, Instagram and all have like spoiled the attention span. How do we get attention, you know? And you know, all those paradigm shifts are there. People are like, you know, as you mentioned, how do we handle impatience, if I can put it? How do we handle that?
Yeah.
You know, because people have become highly impatient. If they do not get something quite fast, you know, they just go away, move away from it, and they'll go to a different thing. So have you ever came across something which, you know, you're like, okay, you know, people are getting impatient here and we could do something?
Lots. Yeah, it happens all the time. I have a particular kind of method that I use for dealing with that kind of thing. So step one is you need to identify the points where people are getting impatient. Unfortunately, that's incredibly easy. My first stop is normally Google Analytics, where I'm looking for pages or parts of the application which have got a very high dropout rate, where they're abandoning the site. Then the next question becomes, well, okay, so we found a page where people are dropping out. Why? Where is it going wrong on the page? And then I typically turn to a tool like Microsoft Clarity, which you might not have heard about, is similar to Hotjar. But it's free, so I like it because it's free. And also I like the interface. I think it's been well designed. And in that, it will give me, I can go to a particular page and I can get lots of data on that page. So I can see things like rage clicks, where someone has got really frustrated and is repeatedly clicking on something, or dead clicks, where they're trying to click on something that's not clickable, or quick backs, where they go to a page, go, no, that was what I wanted, and go back quickly. All of those are indications of frustration. And then you've got heat maps as well, and you can watch session recordings of people interacting on the page. And normally that will give you an idea of why things are going wrong on a page. Sometimes you need to supplement it with some usability testing to if you're really still struggling to understand why, that qualitative usability testing can be helpful in that situation. But most of the time you can get a sense of what's going wrong with the page. Now, depending on what the issue is, oftentimes it comes down to something called cognitive load, that people are overwhelmed by the amount of information on a page. And there's a great psychological experiment that beautifully demonstrates this, called the invisible gorilla. And in this particular experiment they had two teams of basketball players, one wearing black tops, one wearing white tops. This is going somewhere. And they're dribbling a ball. Each team has got a ball and they're dribbling the ball, and you're told to count the number of people passing, the number of passes that the black team makes. And there's so much going on, and there's people moving in and out of frame, and it's very confusing and overwhelming. And so a large majority of people don't actually notice the fact that a person dressed in a gorilla's costume dances across the screen, right? And they're totally oblivious of that because they're being overwhelmed and overstimulated, and that is cognitive load. And so what happens is when we go to a lot of websites, we are overwhelmed by the amount that's going on there. And so our cognitive load shoots up. Now, when that happens, not only do we miss things, but we get frustrated, we get distrustful, interestingly enough. It puts us in a bad mood. And being in a bad mood makes our cognitive load go even higher, and we get into this cycle. So the long and the short of it is you need to remove distraction. So what I often end up doing is going through a problem page and basically looking at every single element on that page and asking 3 questions in order. Question number 1, can I remove this? If I remove this element of the page, what would the consequences be, right? So that's the preferable thing, just to remove stuff. If you can't remove it, then the next question is, well, can I hide this? Can I put it under an accordion, a tab on another page? You know, can I shift it out of the way? And that's the second best option. And if I can't do that, then the third best option is because I visually shrink it and de-emphasize it. And so by going through that process, you can remove the clutter and the distractions that is causing people's cognitive load to shoot up. So that tends to be the approach that I use.
Yeah, that's an amazing approach. Testing it and regularly testing it along with the users. You put it online, you do those changes and you see how they react. Yeah, that's amazing. Many people know that how important user experience is. It can make or break businesses. Nowadays businesses are putting in lots and lots of effort into making amazing user experiences, so that all these things like impatience and all are taken into viewpoint. And how do we get people to go through the journey and click and do the action that we really want them to perform? It's in your book as well. People do understand, but at the same time, over your work period of such a long time, do you have for businesses, do you have something like your key takeaways of user experience, which you have been doing? Do you have something, you have a philosophy there?
It's actually at its heart, user experience design is pretty simple. In some ways, it's almost an oxymoron. In some ways, it's almost a contradiction, in the sense that designing an experience is very hard to do. What you're doing really is getting out of the way a lot of the time, right? So for example, you're trying to make a seamless and frictionless experience as possible. So really good user experience design is invisible. You don't even think about it, right? You just go through an action and it happens seamlessly and effortlessly. And it's great. And so that is the core of good user experience design. User experience design is not the same as the conversion rate optimization work I do, because in conversion rate optimization, the aim is, as you said, to get the user to do something. With the user experience design, it's to let the user do the thing they want to do. Right. And so sometimes those two things can feel at odds with one another. But one of the big things that I've learned from the conversion rate optimization side of things is that one of the best ways of getting a user to do what you want them to do is picking the right moment to ask them to do it. Mm-hmm. And so let me tell you a real story, right? I speak at a lot of conferences, and you tend to meet the same speakers again and again and again when you go to these conferences, and you get to know these people very well, and you start playing silly games together. And so we all decided that one conference, we were all going to go in the geekiest t-shirt we could possibly find, and we were going to wear these really geeky t-shirts. So I then had to go and buy a geeky t-shirt. And somebody recommended this e-commerce site, and so which sold t-shirts. So I went to this website, and immediately on arriving on the site, a pop-up modal popped up and said, sign up for our newsletter and get 10% off of your first purchase, right?
That's
right. And you're shaking your head. You know what I immediately did? I closed the modal, right? and then went and looked at the t-shirts and that kind of thing, because
And you frowned.
they'd
And you,
interrupted my task. Yeah, sorry, go on.
I was just saying, and you frowned as well. You got annoyed, as early,
Yeah,
as I came into the site.
yeah.
It's there. Yeah.
But it was worse than that, you see. So they'd interrupted me completing this task. And then what happened? I found a t-shirt I wanted. Well, now I want my 10% off, right? Where's, how do I get my 10%? It's gone. Okay. So now all the t-shirts look 10% more expensive and they don't look good value for money. And I left without buying anything. And so that's really where conversion rate optimization and user experience dovetail, that you don't interrupt the user in doing whatever they're doing, but you pick a moment where there is a natural break in that experience, right? So the logical place was the product page, where I found a t-shirt I like and I'm vacillating over whether to buy it or not. Well, that's the time to offer me a 10% discount. So a lot of user experience design is really about just facilitating that user experience and getting out of the way, and then just coming in at appropriate moments to nudge the user in the right direction. I don't know whether you've ever read the book Nudge. It's a superb book that I highly recommend to anybody. It's not about web design. It's about how to influence people without manipulating them, really, but to help them make good decisions. And that's exactly what you need to be doing in user experience design, is nudging people, encouraging them in a good direction.
Right. Do you think in this case, and I'm just throwing an idea up, that if the user would go and you would be buying a t-shirt and you'll click, okay, I like this, there's a discount that they're showing, and maybe these are other t-shirts, and you click on it and it says that, hey, Paul, you're here for the first time, or you're here for the nth time, and we really enjoy that you are a customer for this special occasion. Just for this once, we're giving you 10% discount. Would that convert you into a loyal customer?
And that's very interesting, right? What you've talked about there's a difference between an incentive and, I've forgotten the word. There's a word for it, and I can't remember the word for the other version. Reciprocal, right? Reciprocation, right? So an incentive is, if you do X, I will give you Y, right? So if you sign up for our newsletter, I will give you 10% off. Okay, that becomes a transaction in people's minds. In return for my email address, I'm going to get a discount, right? So that in people's minds is seen as a transaction. What you just described there encourages psychological thing in us, which is called reciprocation, where when somebody gives us an unconditional gift, right? We've already made the decision to buy the t-shirt, right? And suddenly, you're, for no reason whatsoever, you're offering me a 10% discount. That makes me feel good. That's not a transaction, that's a gift. And that triggers reciprocation in me. I don't like the fact, well, I do. It's at kind of multiple levels. There is a social bias in us to want to repay a gift, right? Let me give you a real example again. I used to use MailChimp. I'm sure you're familiar with MailChimp. One day out of the blue, I got something through the post from MailChimp. It was a little Freddy, their monkey that they have, a little figure of him. And it's just a handwritten note saying, thanks for being a great customer.
Wow.
Right? That blew me away. So what did I do? I felt the need to thank them. I felt the need to reciprocate. So I posted to my, 46,000 Twitter followers, hey, I got this great thing from MailChimp today, as my way of thanking them. They didn't ask me to do that because that would have become a transaction, but it naturally occurred. And so they get a load of publicity out of it. So that's what I mean about the difference between a reciprocative action of giving a gift and an incentive. So you're entirely right. That would work very well because it would trigger our reciprocation bias.
Exactly. My idea came from restaurants. Whenever, sometimes I go to restaurants and they're like, okay, we're giving you come here quite often and we're giving you a free brownie, or would you
Yeah,
like something, or an extra drink. And I become loyal to them. I'm like, they care about even doing this for me, and there's a reciprocation there. So
yeah,
I tend to go there more than maybe other restaurants where I feel I'm not cared about. So there are,
absolutely.
yeah, there are few Indian apps who use the same kind of thing. I've seen an upcoming few Indian apps, who are doing the same thing, and people are becoming more loyal to them because it's highly competitive market. There are lots of people in here and lots of different kinds of apps. So yeah, that's a good idea. Paul, I'm really enjoying your stories. Is there any other story you want to share with us?
Oh, other stories. I tell you, so this is another little random example of what user experience really is. Have you noticed how much you see in job ads the word user experience and user interface used interchangeably? We want a UX UI designer, as if they're the same thing. And they're radically not. They're fundamentally not. And it really annoys me when it's presented in that way. And it's not that a UX designer is just interested, and UX designer doesn't just create wireframes all day. That's not what we're about. We're looking at the journey holistically from end to end. And sometimes that can have nothing whatsoever to do with an interface. And a great example of this, it was when the iPad first came out. I bought an iPad, and I got one that was cellular and had connectivity, built into it. And I got my SIM card and I put it in, and it didn't work. Right now, immediately I contacted Apple. No, I didn't actually. That's wrong. First thing I did was I went to my cellular provider's website and did a search, right? So that was my first touch point, my first interaction with them. And I looked on the website, nothing, no information on it whatsoever. So then I took a really, big sigh, and I thought, okay, I'm going to have to ring up customer support at the cellular provider. So it's the first day the iPad was out. So you can guess that, their phone lines were backed up, and I had to sit on hold forever and wait around. It was a terrible experience. And I got through to them and talked to this person, and they confidently said, yes, your account is enabled for this. There is no reason you must have a faulty iPad. And I was so sure that I didn't, but that was it. I hit this brick wall. So I hung up on them and went away frustrated and angry. Very reluctantly contacted Apple. They picked up in 3 rings, right? And not only did they pick up in 3 rings, he said to me, I don't think the problem is with your iPad, but I will send you a replacement iPad just to make sure. Now that is outstanding customer service. But I said to him, look, no, don't bother, because I'm so confident you're right. And so I was kind of stuck, and I rang up customer service again. And while I was sitting on hold, I got so frustrated that I tweeted, right? Having a go at my cellular provider. Almost straight away, I got a tweet back from my cellular provider saying, oh, that's a known issue. This is how to fix it. Now, the reason I tell that story is because how terrible experience did I have with my cellular provider when they actually knew the answer, but that wasn't joined up organizationally. The social media people weren't talking to the call center people or to the website. And so one of the biggest problems I face all the time when I'm working on user experience design is business silos not communicating with one another. The person that owns the website isn't talking to the call center people. The call center people aren't talking to the social media people. And customers fall between these business silos all of the time. So if you've got a product or a service, even if you're just an entrepreneur with a small business, really pay attention to those points where customers get handed off. So for example, a customer, when they're invoiced, maybe you use Stripe to handle your invoicing, right? But that's a really disjointed experience, because if I want to cancel my account, suddenly I have to go to Stripe to do that rather than your website. I fall between the gaps. So looking for those gaps in experience is such an important part of creating a good experience.
Amazing. Yeah. So in a way, I always say this thing that the user experience designers or researchers, that they are deep into psychology of how people work, how things work, how even different cultures work. Different cultures have different ways of doing things. What may work in Japan may not work in UK, and
Yeah.
vice versa. And yeah, I mean, I always, it intrigues me how people take a same thing on a different level when they are working on different cultures. We tend to at times work around the globe, and at times we find, okay, we were putting this color, just for example, a color, and in this culture it's not considered that auspicious, while in other cultures it is. If you remember, just when the UI and UX was starting up, as a field, there used to be like these two buttons. One used to be green, okay, accepted, and there used to be red. And ultimately, people, the UX designers, found out that why do we need to put red? If people want to cancel it, why are we showing it's not a good way? It's not a good thing to cancel it.
Yeah.
Yeah, so there were many things like this. How do you feel? I've been talking to a few people, and different kinds of people. There are people who are working on airport experience designs. How exactly to go into airports, and what anxieties you face there, and how do you get out of those anxieties, and how they're designing the whole process, the whole system. But at the same time, Paul, I'm looking that in the future, 1,000 point gorilla is coming up. It's quantum computing. If you're sure of it, I was talking to someone on a different podcast, and this person and this agency is into quantum computing. They are working for IBM as well, and IBM owns about 6 quantum computers. As of now, so they're creating a hybrid system where our server speeds are gonna be 150 times what they are right now. 150 at least. So our world is going to be very fast now. It's going to be, anything that will just click would be just easily accessible. Do you think, and I've not talked to any designer as of yet about it, but do you think that we are moving more into 3D space in the interfaces? How would the interfaces change when the servers are 150 times faster?
Yeah, I don't think, I mean, performance is massively important on websites because of people's short attention spans, etc. But I don't feel that server speeds are going to be a primary. I think we've almost crossed that barrier. There's no reason that the problem we face now is not to do with server speeds, it's to do with connectivity speeds. And of course, that's improving as well. I think what's more interesting in terms of the future of the web is actually the impact that AI is having and will increasingly have. That I think the role of websites, individual websites, is going to probably quite radically change. So at the moment, the majority of people still go to a website to find information. Sure, Google will surface some information directly within it, and so there's less need to click through to a website. But I think increasingly, as we have these conversational interfaces and these large language models, the most of our interactions to gain information will actually be via those models and the interface, those conversational interfaces with those models. I don't think that's going to replace websites. For a start, those large language models are going to need to train off of something. But also, I think people will still want to click through to validate the information they're getting back from the large language model and to get additional context around it. So what all this means is that I think that jump in computing power that you were talking about, really the benefit is mainly going to become around the response time of these large language models. At the moment, there is a delay in them responding to you. I think that delay will become less and less significant over time. So those conversations will become much more natural over time, and we will rely less on visiting individual websites to get answers to very specific questions. They'll become more of a research tool, a context tool, etc.
Okay, but at the same time, these language models are getting the data from the websites. So At the same time, websites are going to be relevant. So, I feel that it's going to be a hybrid world, where people are going to
Oh
go
yeah,
on
yeah, yeah,
Google
yeah,
and
exactly.
yeah,
Yeah.
they're going to go to
Uh,
Google and they're going to check through Chat GPT and other LLMs at the same time, because I've been using it and sometimes it lies. Sometimes then I re-ask it, "Are you sure?" Then it says, "No, I'm not that sure, but you have to check it. Go and check
yeah.
online."
And that raises some interesting questions, right? You are entirely right, and that's exactly what I was driving at. That I'm not saying websites are going to go away; they're going to be what the large language models use, and in addition, they're also going to be a context checker, so people can go through to a website to confirm what you're being told by the large language model, and to have additional information around that. But think about that from a user interface point of view, right? We may well be going back to the way that the web originally was, because suddenly need for complex navigational hierarchies are going away. People are going to be deep linked to individual pages. Perhaps we don't need traditional navigation. Now, I don't know. I don't know what's going to happen. This is just pure speculation on my part. But perhaps actually what we'll end up with is organizations will have, I mean, there'll still be the web apps, there'll be the applications, although eventually I suspect even those will move into, some kind of AI interface, but that's further ahead. So there'll still be web apps, but in terms of informational websites, I'm wondering whether we'll end up with repositories of documents, individual documents, rather than an interlinked, website in the traditional manner that we have it today. I don't know. But it will be interesting to see how things evolve and things adapt. And yes, large language models get it wrong. And I think they will continue to get it wrong for a long length of time. And so I don't see that there will still be a need for users to visit websites. We're not going to get to the place anytime soon where organizations can basically publish JSON files that a large language model can just read directly, and that is their website. I don't think we're going to be at that for a while, but it is quite interesting how it could change the nature of how we design websites if users are basically deep linking in, which we're already beginning to see, of course, through Google. The home pages tend not to be the most traffic pages anymore,
Right. How would that be for UI designers?
Interesting. This is why I'm quite glad I'm a UX designer instead of a UI designer, because I'm just as interested in conversational interfaces as I am in UI interfaces. There is still a lot of work for a UI designer. The nature of that work will change. So there are some websites that are experiential websites, right? So if you're going, for example, to a website, the Harry Potter website, right? For example, it's a destination site in its own right. Okay. So you're going to want beautiful design. You're going to want a great interface. You're going to want interactivity and animation and all those kinds of things. That's going to stay the same. Web apps are still going to need those interface elements that we're very familiar with today. So it's not going to fundamentally change that. The area it's going to impact is pure informational websites. And what I mean by that is, for example, my own website, a blog, right? Or maybe your corporate website, right? That really is just a marketing brochure with a bit of functionality built into it. Now, those are the examples that are going to change. And I think what you'll see is a shift away from graphic design with all of its branding and all of its stuff like that, towards more informational design, where it's more about readability, legibility, accessibility, scannability of content, those kinds of things. But again, I'm making this up. I've no more idea than you have, really. Telling the future is a fool's game. I've been working in the industry for 27 years now. And I went through years of writing, what 2024 has got in store. I never got it right. Nobody ever does. There's always a curveball that comes in and ruins it all. But that's my current thinking anyway.
Yeah, I'm a bit optimistic for UI designers. I think, what you're saying is completely right. So there's going to be one branch, which would be like, people are looking just for information, and, they're going to ask their assistants or GPTs, they're going to ask them that, hey, what about this? What about that? And it would feed them, okay, this is about it, and you can do this. And at times people would be just asking it like how Siri does. But at the same time, I feel that I want to be optimistic for UI designers. I think, what these really fast things are going to bring, 3D experiences. So we have to look at user interfaces a bit differently. And some of the websites,
Yeah.
at least, and in some of the experiences, at least, where we have to really look at things.
So I'm very optimistic about UI design. I don't think UI design is going to go anywhere. I think 3D environments, which you just touched upon there, are further out than we think they are in terms of mainstream adoption. Don't get me wrong, I was lusting after Apple's Vision headset as much as anyone. The Oculus 3 looks great. But until that kind of technology is in glasses like these, I don't know whether this is an audio or video podcast, but until it's in a normal pair of glasses, I think the level of adoption is going to be relatively niche. I think it's going to be huge in gaming. I think it will become increasingly big in the workplace. But I think from a kind of everyday access, it's still easier to pull the phone out of your pocket for a while anyway. Now, when we do get to that point, when we get to the point where, we can start augmenting reality with appropriate information, then you're going to see another gold rush. I mean, that'll be just like when the iPhone was released or when the web first came along, and, there will be a big shift all of a sudden. But I think we're still a few years away from that, just from a hardware point of view, really.
Exactly. I feel the same with you. I'm exactly with you on the same point, because as soon as like Apple's Vision Pro came up, I have even many enthusiasts, in my team, who were like, okay, we're going to get them, it's going to be huge. And I told them, it's good for some things, for learning something, going through simulation, but people cannot wear it and, go around and walk in the park, and they might not be using it. So it doesn't have that much use case as of now. Yeah, so
But I think I very much believe that Apple know that.
Yeah.
The way they've priced it and everything, I think, is an indication of that. It's them putting a stake in the ground and say, this is the way we're going, and really to start moving developers, third-party developers, in that direction, so that when they do drop the pair of glasses a few years down the line, there's already an ecosystem in place and people are already accepting of it. I mean, we saw with Google Glasses when that came out that people weren't ready for it. There was it was a really good piece of technology, but there was a massive backlash because of privacy issues. People felt uncomfortable with it. This is Apple drip feeding us, and taking us in the direction of going that this is normal, this is okay, and so I think by the time it shifts, it will become feel much more natural.
Right. I feel the same. They're doing it. Facebook came with Ray-Bans, and yeah. That's a privacy issue somewhere, but people are used to it now. They're streaming.
You haven't seen the
everything.
same backlash. Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. And at one time, people were like, there is lots of privacy. How can you do that? So people are accepting it. There's a paradigm shift there. Yeah, but what I meant was that our web space, it would be 3D. Our navigations would be like very easy. It won't be like I have to click somewhere and do things. And I'll be like, some things lying here, and I can change it through hand gestures.
I'm not so convinced. I'm sorry. You've got to consider the rewards you get back from that. But I might be wrong, by the way, and you're probably in the majority, and I might be just old and cynical and grouchy and too fast wanting change. But the problem that I have with the idea of a 3D web, and by the way, that has been experimented with before, is what's the benefit you get back from that? What does it give you in terms of productivity other than a wow factor? Because a wow factor goes very quickly. Oh, I can see an image in 3D. Oh, I can have multiple panes. But we can have multiple panes now in our browser if we want to. We can have, and actually it's just messy right? Having all these different things going on is messy, it's confusing, it increases our cognitive load. And on top of that, you started going like this, right? Again, I don't know whether it's an audio, swiping your hand around, is imagining moving things around in a 3D environment. Talk to Tom Cruise about that. And I know that sounds like a weird thing to say, but when he filmed the film Minority Report, right? In Minority Report, it's a sci-fi futuristic film in case you haven't seen it. And they have these 3D environments and he does that. He's swiping windows around. His arms got tired, right?
Yeah.
And pay attention to what Apple have done with the Vision Pro, right? The thing that they emphasized was those hand gestures you can do just with your hand sitting on your lap, right? Just a pinch or just a little, little swipe with your hand. Not these big gestures. So from a web point of view, of course, from a gaming point of view, it'll be amazing. From a, certain productivity work environments like engineering and stuff like that, surgery, all those kinds of things, 3D environments are amazing. But in terms of the day-to-day life that you lead right now, the only thing that I can imagine becoming really actually improved through adding a third dimension to it really basically boils down to video, watching videos of family members, or as you saw in that Apple thing, or watching 3D films, that kind of thing, or possibly niche moments like if you're on a plane and you want to block out the world and stuff like that. For the web, not so much, in my opinion.
Okay. The reason why I said that, because I've been seeing how kids and teenagers are on their tablets all the day and they use this gesture a lot. So I feel, when in 3-4 years, when their time is coming into adulthood, they are already using this gesture, and might be they like that gesture because we were never used to scrolling. We always hated like doing this, but eventually we came to that.
And you might well be right. It might be a generational thing, but I think it's a lot of it is going to come down to, you see, what you can never get away with from a user experience point of view. Technology comes and goes, right? But what doesn't change, at least not at the same rate as people, we're even across generations, okay? We've still got the same ergonomic problems, right? One generation to the next. Admittedly, if you're very young or very old, you have specific issues around that, but everybody eventually ends up very old and has always been very young. And also cognitively, we haven't really changed that much. So whenever I come across a piece of technology that kind of butts up against one of those physiological or psychological issues, I always question whether it's going to get enough momentum to become commonplace in us. And 3D for me at the moment is one of those, but the devil is in the detail. There's nothing intrinsically wrong with gestures, and actually gestures, as you say, are very natural in some ways, but it's how that's implemented and the degree of physicality involved in it that I think will be the key factor there.
Yeah, we'll see how it comes up in a few years. Yeah, it would be interesting to see. Maybe we'll talk in 4 years and see.
Yeah,
It would be interesting. Where is it going? We just wanted to ask you, do you have a memorable project or a case study where UX design had a significant impact on the product success or a business success? Do you want to share that?
Yeah, I mean, one that, well, let's take one that I'm working on right now. And I love it for its purity, really. It's just a texting campaign. So it's sending out SMS messages. They asked me to take a look at it, and we literally had a 1-hour call chatting over, this campaign. And we were able to see a 15% increase in conversion rate just through making some tiny changes. And of course, when you're talking about SMS messages, it's very little you can do. What it came back to was really two things that I think lie at the heart of user experience design, which was simplicity and empathy. So the texts that they were writing, they were trying to sell. They were saying too much. They were putting too much information in. They were overwhelming people, and they were showing no empathy or connection or understanding with the user. And so all we did was simplify it. Simplify it, added a few line breaks to make it clearer to read, pointed out the call to action, thanked people for their involvement because it was a charity fundraising thing, showed a little bit of empathy that it's quite a challenge that they're undertaking. And suddenly we saw a 15% increase in conversion. And I guess that's why I loved that project so much, is because it shows that you don't need to hard sell. You don't need to force your product on people. You don't need to convince them. What you need to do is empathize and help them and keep it as simple and clean as possible, you know? Yeah. So yeah, that's at the top of my mind at the moment. So that's the one you get.
Amazing. That's highly valuable for my marketing team. I'll show them that. I'll show them, because that's what I've been trying to tell them, because we're creating a campaign lately and they're trying to say a lot, while I told them the greatest words are just do it, think different. And these have been used, and people are much more intelligent than what you think they are. So you don't have to convey everything. It's just few things, and they'll understand.
Yeah.
Amazing. I want to talk about your books. And I have read Click. How do you get inspiration to write your books? And are there any favorites, or all of them are your favorite? Or you want to speak about them? Yeah.
Books but writing books for me is the same as the reason that I blog. A lot of people see blogging and content marketing and books as a great marketing tool for promoting your services and your blah, blah, blah. To an extent, that's true, although I don't think it's ever going to be enough to justify the amount of work that goes into it, especially with something like a book. But for me, the reason I do these things is to help me, right? I write books to help me understand and think through in a logical, coherent manner what it is that I'm talking about, and to get better at articulating it. There's the saying, isn't there, that if you really want to understand something, teach it. And that's really true. So whenever I write books, it always you're almost seeing my process of learning that thing or embedding that thing in my head. So what I write books about is inevitably been the thing that over the previous few years I've been wrestling with, right? So if you look at my first book, which was the Website Owner's Manual, that was when one person used to own a website and do everything. And it's like, how do you balance all of those things? That's long gone, but that's where it was to begin with. My most recent book was, Click, which was about how to encourage people to act on the website. But that was me wrestling with I want to encourage people to act on a website, but I don't want to manipulate them. I don't want to be using dark patterns. So how does that work? How does that operate? User experience revolution. That was me going, okay, so how do we get a culture in big organizations where they are user centric and they are doing things user orientated? So it's all me kind of thinking through things really and trying to work out the best way to do them. Okay, when you actually look at the words I've written, I write it as if this is the best way of doing things. But that's only because I've had time to kind of play it with it and mess around with it and work out what really does work in a given situation. As for my favorite, I have a very soft spot for Digital Adaptation, which was my second book. The reason being is that came at such an interesting time where traditional organizations, and I work with a lot of traditional organizations, universities, large charities, big corporates, that kind of thing, where they were still trying to wrap their heads around what digital meant to them and their organizations. And so that was probably one of the more influential books that I wrote, and kind of got picked up quite a lot and used quite a lot So yeah, that's the one I enjoyed writing the most, but actually probably isn't very relevant anymore. That conversation's been done and everybody's moved on. But yeah, that's the one I think I've got the softest spot for.
Amazing. So these are kind of conversations to yourself, which
Yeah.
which is the way that people connect to them. So yeah, that's really great. Paul, there are just two questions from my team. I just asked them. So one is Salil is asking that from our team. How do you convey your design vision to others, especially when they may not possess the same design sensibilities in your team? And what strategies do you employ to help them develop their design abilities?
Those are massive questions. I believe, I guess I can answer both in one go, actually. Process, having a design process. I think too many designers kind of disappear into a cupboard somewhere and have this big reveal moment where they go, this is my genius, this is my design. And that almost never works, because you shock the people you're showing to, because it won't match their mental model of how they imagined it to be, and so they tend to react negatively in that situation. Also, ultimately, it comes down to their opinion versus yours, and it all becomes about personal opinion. And really, your opinion as a designer doesn't matter. Your client's opinion doesn't matter. The only opinion that matters is your users. And so ultimately, whenever I do any kind of design work, I have a robust process that I work through, which has not sign-off points, not points where the client signs it off, but rather points where we validate it with users. And so we will do a lot of lightweight testing. We tend to start off with some surveying, where we, understand user needs. We do preference tests. We do first click tests. We do 5-second tests. There are all these different types of tests, and I've written extensively on testing design on my website. So yeah, having that robust process, because then you're taking the subjectivity out of the conversation, and your opinion versus mine, and it becomes much more centered around the users. And also the process helps to educate stakeholders as well. As you go, they can see the design emerge based on the testing, and they can see how it responds to the testing. So that tends to be how I work.
Great. That's a great insight. So it's all about validation as well.
Yeah, basically.
Okay, one last question from Garima. How do I identify, she's asking for herself, how do I identify where the problems are in the user experience of my product, which is already running?
Well, that goes back to the process that I was talking about earlier, where first of all, you look at your analytics, you look at, okay, where are people abandoning, but also look at get something like Microsoft Clarity running on the site, and look at where people are rage clicking, back clicking, dead clicks, all of that kind of stuff. And you will quickly see where things are going wrong on your site. And what you could do, for example, in Microsoft Clarity, and remember, this is a free tool, so there's no barrier to entry here, that you could go in and say, I want to watch videos of everybody who raged click. And you can sit and watch videos of people moving around the interface. They're going, why isn't this stupid thing working? And then immediately you know where the issues are. And that's 80% of the challenge, is just working out where people are getting frustrated. Once you know where things are going wrong, then fixing it is relatively straightforward in comparison.
Amazing. Thank you, Paul. Thank you for answering those questions for the team. And really, we had a really, really great podcast. Thank you very much, Paul. It has been a pleasure.
You are more than welcome.